Hi, Caleb from Brownells here, and in today's video we're going to be doing basic maintenance on the Remington 870 pump action shotgun. So we've done our maintenance series on these in the past, but we're just going to kind of do a refresher, if you will. And what we're going to be going through here, like I said, it's basic maintenance. So how often do you have to do something like this? Honestly, maybe every time you shoot it, depending on how much you go out. Maybe not, maybe every few times. But this is something that you do need to do quite often. And this is going to be different than, let's say, like your annual or, something like that type of maintenance. So annual maintenance, I would say, that's when you bring it to your gunsmith and he does a complete strip down of every little thing, every part that can be taken apart. He takes it apart, cleans it. That's definitely something you can do yourself if you're feeling up to it. And I say annual, depending on how much you shoot, that may be annual. It may be, something you do every year and a half to 2 years. It all depends. So, but with this, let's jump right into it. We're going to be doing basic maintenance. So, things we're going to be using here. I have my needle oiler here. This is going to be my primary lubricant. That is actually some Sons of Liberty Gunworks Spec 76 oil. I busted the big oil thing it comes in, and so I put it into that, and it was a mess. It was a whole thing. We have some dry lubricant. I'll show you where to use that. We have some rim oil, and we have our solvents. Still the best solvents ever. Hoppy's number 9, classic. And then we're just going to be using some duster here. If you have an air compressor with an air chuck, you can definitely use that. I just grabbed this off of our office supply shelf, so you can get this stuff anywhere. And I have a set of punches here. We're just going to be using a punch out of it, and we'll burn that bridge when we get there. All right. We also have cleaning rods here. So I have this dewy coated rod, and on the end I have a brush specifically for 20 gauge. We're doing a 20 gauge 870, but everything I'm going to show you here applies to the 12 or whatever you have as well. All right. And then for just ease of swapping back and forth, I have another one here set up with a jag. This is a 50 cal rifle jag. I like to use this one on shotguns as well. You can use, the little eyelet type patch holder, whatever you want to use. You don't have to use Dewey rods, and you don't have to use exactly what I'm using. The same thing goes for the oil and solvent. You can use whatever you prefer. You don't have to use exactly what I'm using. This is just what I like to use. This is what I use personally, so I figured why not use it in this video. Alright, so yes, we do actually have coffee in these cups. I'm going to be working with some solvents here. I'm going to move it kind of far away for now. And I'm going to come back to that later. Alright. So let's just kind of jump right into it here. We're going to start with disassembly. First thing you need to do whenever you pick up your firearm, step 1 is going to be to clear it. Make sure, bring that action open and do a good visual inspection. Make sure that chamber's clear. Alright, and then step 2 is going to be to repeat step 1. Okay, so with that done, we can actually start disassembling. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is, I'm actually going to open the action just a little bit here. And I'm going to remove the barrel. Okay, so to remove the barrel on a Remington 870, you just need to unscrew this retainer right here. So, standard threads, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, We're just going to unscrew that. If for whatever reason yours is seized on and you can't get it off, don't just take, regular channel locks to it or whatever. So, Brownells, we actually sell, as well as other places you can get these from. It's a set of, it's basically channel locks, but they have padded jaws in them. I'm a terrible host, I don't have any here to show you. But those work great for removing these if yours is stuck on. And also, this is my personal 870 20 gauge that I haven't cleaned in a while. I've been neglecting it. And so yeah, we're in for a treat here. Alright, and then once you have that retainer taken off, I'm just going to set it aside. The barrel will actually just come straight off, just like that. Alright, so there's your 870 barrel. I'll go over some things to look out for during reassembly, but also your choke tube. We're going to be removing our choke tube and cleaning that. I don't like to clean the barrel with the choke tube installed, so I'm going to go ahead and unscrew that choke tube. My choke tube has, external point to grab onto, so I don't need a wrench for it. But if yours is internal, just remove it how you would normally when you're swapping them out. All right, I'll set that choke tube aside. Look at that. I was thinking ahead. I actually greased my choke tube, and we'll talk about that more later as well. So the barrel's out. We'll set that aside. All right, so now to remove everything else in here, I need to get this trigger assembly out. And to do that, if you notice, there are two pins, one small pin and one large pin. So we're going to go ahead and knock those pins out. I have a bench block I'm going to set my action on. You can use a block of wood, whatever you have on hand. You don't have to use a bench block. And I'm going to take a punch. And again, if you have something else that is punch-like and fits the diameter, you can use that. You don't have to go out and buy punches specifically to do this. You can knock these pins out in any order, front, rear, doesn't matter. I'll just start with the rear. You can use a hammer. You don't really need a hammer. You can just give it a good bump, and they'll come right out. Alright, there's one pin. And we'll do the same thing on the front one here. Just be careful not to hit your receiver. And there's the other pin. Easy enough. Alright. So here, we just take the trigger group, and we will just pull it out here. Put that action forward. Alright. There we go. And that'll come right out. There's a little bit of grass and stuff in my action here. Alright. So with that trigger group out, what we need to do now is go ahead and remove our bolts, the carrier, the action assembly, all that stuff. So if you notice, if you try to push it out, you hit a hard wall there. And there's grass and stuff falling out of here. I was doing some bird hunting a few months ago, so there's a little bit of grass in here. So if you look underneath on the inside here, on the left and right side, you have these bars that are like spring bars, right? So those are your shell interrupters, and you got to push those in to get your action out. So what I'll do is I'll push one side in. So the side opposite to the bolt, I'll push that in, just kind of push it in with your finger, and slide your bolt forward, and you should feel it start to come out. And if yours gets hung up, do the same thing on the opposite side. We didn't have that issue, ours is coming right out. So nothing's holding this stuff together, so just kind of make sure you grab it as it comes out. We'll slide this whole assembly off here. Alright. So what you end up with is your bolt here, which we'll just pull that off of their action bars. And you can separate the wood from the actual action assembly, but you don't need to do that for this. In most cases, this is just fine. Alright, and then our bolts sits on that carrier block there. So we'll just separate these two just like that. Alright. And your bolts itself, you have your extractor, the plunger, the spring. You can leave all that in unless you're having issues with it. But we're not going to dive into that just yet here in this video. But just do a quick check on it. It should spring back nice and easy, just like that. Alright, so that's functioning properly. And this is our locking block here up top, so it just kind of floats around there. We're going to clean that while it's in place as well. And do a visual inspection of your firing pin and spring. That's down in there. So just look at that spring, make sure it's not broken, anything like that. So if you look, let me find a pointing tool here. The spring is kind of spaced out, then it gets tight in the middle, then it's spaced out again. That's normal, that's how they're supposed to look. And to check tension on that, we'll just literally just push it from the back. It should go in and spring back out just like that. Alright. And the retainer pin for the firing pin is right here in the top. So if you were to drive this out, you would drive it out from top to bottom because the bottom's knurled. Again, for this basic maintenance video, we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to leave it just like that, and we're going to clean everything as is. So especially on the 870, these, they get dirty, but they don't get super dirty, so there's no reason to do that during basic maintenance. All right, so as far as the actual receiver goes, there's one more thing we're going to actually remove. And there's a tool that makes this a lot easier. It's a corkscrew type tool. And honestly, with that, I would recommend investing in one. They make things a lot easier. You can do it without, you can do it with a pair of pliers, you know, whatever. But it's just way easier with that tool. Alright, so this is what that tool will look like. It's just a tapered thread that you just corkscrew in. Like I said, you don't have to use it, but it makes things a lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to use it. Doesn't matter, so this, like I said, this is 20 gauge. Doesn't matter which one it is, the tool will work on wide variety. But we're just going to press it into the spring clamp here. And you got to press it in here because you'll hit your plug if you have a plug in there. Alright, so we'll just screw it in till we feel it bite. Don't screw it in super tight because you're going to be working against yourself because you're going to be creating more friction because you're pushing the edges of the spring out. So just screw it in just until it bites. Now, here's something that's important. And this is under spring tension, so if you're not comfortable with this, I would say, put on some iPro. It's probably not a bad idea to be wearing iPro, especially if you've never done this before. But I'm just going to use a rag to help kind of capture it, right? And then I'm going to pull it out, and I'll move my rag so you can see what's going on here. Knock on wood, I should be okay. I've done this a few times. Alright, so we're just going to wiggle as we kind of let it come out here. Now once it gets to the end, it's under spring tension, right? So I know you can't see, I'm covering it so that I will be able to continue to see in the future. Alright, and there we go, look at that. There's that spring clip still on our tool here. We'll just set that aside. This is our plug and our spring. So we'll set the plug aside. We'll pull the spring all the way out. And we'll continue to inspect these parts as we clean them. There's one more piece in here, and that's going to be the follower. Very important piece. It usually likes to get stuck up here at the top. You can push it down and pull it right out. On your shotgun, it may actually be notched, and you may have a notched retainer as well that you just push in and turn and everything comes out. If you have that type of setup, great. That's a lot easier. You don't need a special tool. But if not, this is how you get it out. Alright, so we'll set our follower aside there. And I'll say this, one of the, especially on the semi-auto versions like your 1100, your 1187, one of the biggest points of failure is actually the follower. Not so much on the 870. The 870 doesn't really have this issue. But the point I'm trying to get at here is that these are available in aluminum. This is a plastic one. You can get an upgraded one if you start having issues with it. So, just food for thought there. If you're not having issues, you don't need to upgrade it. I'm not trying to, just sell you something here. Other than knowledge. I'm trying to sell you knowledge at the price of free $50. Alright. I was acting silly and lost my train of thought. But that's okay. We're going to keep moving forward. Let's talk about this trigger group here. If you notice, if you've never taken one of these apart, you're looking at it, you're like, man, that's pretty complex. And that's okay. We don't need to disassemble any of this. For basic maintenance, we can leave all this assembled. But I will say there are some things to look out for. So remember when we removed the pins? Well, if you look at the pins, they have a groove cut in them. Kind of like your AR-15 trigger pins, if you're familiar with that, right? Those grooves lock in to, notice this little spring clip here. That's what actually retains these pins. So whenever you drive your pin in, it locks into that little spring clip. Same thing with the front. The front one's on this side. I can move it to the other side if I want. This cross pin is cut both sides for it. But the front one's right here, you can see it. And the rear one is back here. You can see it. You just need to make sure you don't knock those off or they don't fall off while you're cleaning it, because those will disappear on the floor. I've had to replace those in the past. Alright, so with all that being said, that's as far as we need to disassemble it. No point in going any further than that. We'll be able to clean everything just like this. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my compressed air and I'm just going to blow all the loose stuff out of here, right? So alright. And I'm going to do the same thing with the trigger group. Grass likes to get stuck up in here as well. Alright. And as far as the actual cleaning process goes, you can start pretty much anywhere. I'm going to start by getting everything clean, and I'm going to save the barrel and the choke tube for last. Okay? So, with that being said, let's just start with the receiver. So things to look out for when you're cleaning your receiver. I have gone through many band-aids and I have scars on my fingers because the railways in this receiver are super sharp. So I've been, in a hurry in the gunsmith shop doing some cleanings, taking a rag, wiping the inside of that. It cuts through the rag, cuts through my fingers. I start bleeding. It's terrible. Then you have to clean blood off the gun, and that's a whole nother process. So be mindful that on the left side in here and on the right side, there are some sharp bars, because what happens is this block that your bolt rides on is basically just riding against that steel. You have steel on steel contact, iron sharpens iron, you have a sharp edge that forms in there. Don't try to go in there and round it off and dull it. You're just going to cause more issues. Just be mindful of it. Okay, that's enough on that. Another thing to look out for also, this is part of the inspection process. You notice there's a block right here. This is silver soldered on there. It's not going to come off. If yours is loose or coming off, that's your barrel support. So if that's gone, your barrel's not going to sit in there tight, and you can actually cause other issues down the road. So just kind of be mindful during your visual inspection that that's there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, and for this, looking at it here, I've shot this quite a bit. It's not super dirty in there. If it is super dirty, you have a bunch of carbon buildup, you can take like an acid brush or something like that and wipe some solvent in there. I'm not going to do that. Honestly, I'm just going to go in with a little bit of rim oil, and I'm just going to spray it in there. And if you want, you can wear gloves. That's perfectly fine. Alright. And I'm going to very carefully, as to not cut myself open here, I'm just going to wipe out the inside of this receiver. Wipe that ejection port area. Those action bar, or those shell interrupters there. I'll come in from the front, wipe out my barrel support area. And that's looking pretty good. Then, what I'll do with the receiver is coat the outside of it in rim oil. I don't really use rim oil as a lubricant. I use it as a protectant mostly. We'll just get a light coat there. Just kind of keeping an eye on where I put my coffee. I don't want anything near it. Put your coffee as far away as possible. We'll just wipe this out here. And you may be thinking, great, he's done with the action. And I am not. We're not done with the action. A very neglected part of any firearm is the magazine. So this magazine tube, we're just going to take a patch. Just one single patch here. Hit it with some rim oil. And I'll just use my 50 cal Jag. I'll set that there. And we'll just run it through there. Just like so. And as you can see, it's a little dirty in there. So what I may actually do, and I'll tell you, I'll warn you in advance here. I'm not one of those people that keep cleaning until, you know, like white glove inspection type stuff. I think that for the most part is silly. All right, so this time I doubled up the patches just to make it a little tighter. There we go. We're gonna go even more here. I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4 patches. You know what? Let's do 5 patches. No, we're gonna do 4. I want to go crazy, but I don't want to go too crazy. I can't remember the last time I cleaned this magazine tube, so we got a bit of dirt in there. All right, and we'll just kind of scrub that in there. You don't want to go too tight because not an issue pushing it up and down this tube, but when you get back here where these shell interrupter latches are, the patches can get hung up on there, and that's no bueno. Alright, and then we'll just push them out. Yeah, it's pretty dirty in there, right? And then I'll just look in there. That's nice, and it's very shiny in there. I know you're not going to be able to see it, but just take my word for it. You know, you can stick your finger in there and feel, and that feels nice. We're going to go with that. That's good. Alright, so now, honestly, that's all we need to do to our receiver assembly here. That's done. That's nice and clean, and we don't need to put any lubricant on there. Everything that we'll be putting into it will be lubricated. Alright, so I'll take my dirty patches, set them neatly aside there on the floor. Alright. So let's move on. I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, you know, you don't have to do this in any particular order. I'm going to move on to these action bar assemblies here. And all I'm going to do is take a rag. And these aren't, I mean, looking at them, they're not super dirty, so we don't need to soak them in solvents or anything like that. These pretty much never get really that dirty. So I'm just going to wipe them down real good here. Then again, rim oil just as a protectant more than anything else. And wipe off the excess. We're just letting that oil get in down into the grain structure of that metal, if you will, and just hydrate that metal. Alright, so looking down here, it's kind of dirty in there. What I typically do, I don't know if I'll be able to do it here, but we'll try, is because this isn't a very long channel, I'll usually just try and stuff a rag down there. Yeah, there we go. Alright. Yep, got all the debris out, and I'll just, a little bit of rim oil, then I'll pick up the rag I dropped. And I'll just kind of do the same thing there. And I'm using a rag. You can use patches. You know, this is... And the way I'm cleaning this gun, this is a way of doing it. It's not necessarily the way of doing it. If you prefer to do something different, that's perfectly okay. Alright, that's action bar assembly. That's done. We'll lubricate as we put everything back together. So, not going to worry about that just yet. Okay. Let's jump on over. We'll just, these pins here, I'll just wipe them down. There's still a little bit of rim oil on this rag, so I'm not even going to bother spraying these pins. Just wipe them, do an inspection, you know, you're looking for anything, chips, cracks, whatever. Just visual inspection, that looks good. Same thing with the other one. You know, any chips, cracks, what have you. Wear is fine, you're going to see where like the bluing comes off, that's perfectly normal. Alright, let's knock out this follower here. The follower does get a little dirty because it moves back and forth in the gun. Picking up all the crud and junk and whatnot here. So we're just going to wipe this down real good. And you can take like an all-purpose brush if you want to, if you have some stubborn stuff on there, and scrub it, but most of the time a rag does just fine. Yeah, see, look how clean we got that. And you can see these dark spots on the orange, that's wear, it's not really dirt, right? So we'll set that down. Our end cap, this nice steel piece here. Mine is an aftermarket one with a sling attachment on it. And what I like to do, just wipe out the inside there. Look at it, any signs of rust, anything like that. I'll just give it a quick spurt there with the rim oil. And there's a lot of like curves and contours on here. I'll just blow off the excess. And that's done. Alright, next. We're going to do the same thing with this block here. So this is a very hard piece of steel. Stuff like carbon and crud and whatnot doesn't really like sticking to really hard steel that well. In most cases, right? So we're just going to wipe it down. Hit it with some rim oil. If you have anything stubborn on there, feel free to use hoppies with a brush. We don't need to do that here. And I kind of, honestly, I purposely didn't clean this gun for a while. Just to do a video like this. I didn't know we were going to be doing this exact video at the time, but I knew we were going to be doing something. So mine's, I say it's pretty dirty comparatively, but it's not super dirty. Alright, and as you can see, this piece here, they don't put any kind of coating or anything on it. They just kind of heat treat it and let it go. And a lot of those dark spots and stuff you see is actually from the heat treating process, so it's not going to look 100% clean, but it didn't from the factory. That's just the actual metal, right? So that one's okay. Let's move on to the bolts. And I think what I've decided, so I'm going to clean it one way here, and then I'm gonna disassemble it just for the sake of this video, just in case, you know, there's something wrong with yours and you don't want to go looking for a separate video. I'll take care. I'll just go ahead and take care of that here. But note, you do not have to disassemble it. So I'm just gonna take my rim oil, spray it down, wipe off the excess, right? Then I'm gonna kind of lift up this block here, and if you put your finger on the back, it'll kind of stay in this up position, and you can wipe it down. The actual part that locks into the gun is this shelf right here. So if you just wipe that, you're good. Nice and clean. Check that out. Alright, and we'll just take, we'll do, again, what we'll do is take our air, blow out the excess, and that's it. Your bolt's clean. But oh well, and wipe off the face. Right, that's where the actual shotgun shell's sitting. So we'll wipe that off. And there's some wear there, but that's perfectly normal. All right, and as promised, I'll go ahead and disassemble it. Show you how to do that. Then I'll put it back together. All right, so you're gonna need a bench block of wood, you know, whatever. Preferably something with a hole in it. You need a hole for that pin to drop out of. So we'll just find a hole. I'll do it just like that. Alright, so it has to come out top to bottom. If you try and drive it out the bottom, you're gonna be working really hard. Okay. Alright, we're gonna take the punch size that fits that hole the closest, which should be a 1/8. Alright. And you're gonna need a hammer. Alright, and we take the hammer, and a lot of these pins, I've seen them where they are very stubborn. You have to hit them hard. I don't think I've ever had this one out, so we'll just kind of see how it goes. Alright, I felt it break free there. Came right out. And if you look at this pin, you can see one side of it is split in several places. Makes it nice and wide on one side. That's why it's hard to get out. So we'll set that aside. And whenever you remove your punch, your firing pin is going to shoot out of there. Notice one side of your firing pin is cut for clearance on that pin we just drove out. Your spring will remain in there. You just lift that out. The locking block itself will come out the bottom. Notice there's a roll pin that sits in there just to index it in the correct place. And as you can see, we pretty much cleaned everything from the outside. You don't need to take this apart to clean it. You would really only need to take this apart if you had a bunch of rust or something in there for whatever reason. It was broken, you needed to replace it. That's the only time you need to take it out. So I'm not going to do any additional cleaning because honestly it's clean. Alright, so that's how you get that out. Let me throw it back together here. To put it back in, that front locking block portion has to be in the front, right? Then we just drop it in like so. This roll pin on the side will go into its home right there. That's its home. Go to your home. Great. Firing pin, spring, non-directional, doesn't matter which way it faces. You just drop it right into its slot there. Firing pin will go into the rear, into the locking block, into the spring, and that bulge on the firing pin there will kind of want to get in the way. So, alright, and then there's a cutout in the front of the bolt for the spring and firing pin to go into. Alright, now you need to make sure your clearance cut on the firing pin is on the same side of the hole in the bolt. Alright, and while you hold it all together, take the retaining pin here, put it into the hole in the bottom. What I usually do is I'll give it a few taps like so. Now it's captured the firing pin. The firing pin moves freely like it should. Now I'll take the biggest punch I have and just hammer this thing flush with the bottom of the bolt. Just like that. Just run your finger across, make sure it's not sticking out. And that's all you got to do. Just like so. Alright. Now I did a little extra in this video now, so like I said, you don't have to do that. Okay. That's clean, that's clean. Trigger assembly. What I'm going to do, take my air, blow it out. I'm going to check the surface contact points here. So the hammer, which is right here. I'm just going to take my rag and wipe these things off. Carrier lifts up and down, right? We're just going to wipe out that carrier. You can lift it up and get underneath it just like that. Then I'm going to take my rim oil. Wipe off as much as I can. And kind of with my rag in place here, I'm going to blow out all that excess rim oil. I know some guys like to leave their trigger group in their 870s or their shotguns in general super wet. I do not, because two reasons. One, it doesn't need to be, and two, just any dirt and stuff and whatever is gonna stick to it. Air is your best friend when cleaning guns. It makes things just so much easier and efficient. Alright. All that's clean. The spring itself, we're just kind of lightly wipe off the outside. I'm not gonna put any lubricant on here. That's what the dry lubricant's for. We'll do that whenever we put it back together. Also inspect that spring, make sure there's no kinks, breaks, whatever. It'll be super obvious. The plug, we'll just hit that real quick. That's easy enough. Alright. Oh, and our retaining clip here. These usually don't get dirty, but I'll just wipe off the outside, make sure I get some of that rim oil from my rag on it, just to prevent it from rusting. Okay, let's move on to the choke tube and the barrel. Alright, let me get all this stuff out the way here. I'm actually going to take my barrel, put it in my padded vice straws, just like this. Alright, and I'm just going to kind of start by cleaning out the area here, this extension piece. And this little cut here is where the locking block on your bolts, if I can demonstrate, hooks into whenever everything's locked into place. Just like so. Alright. And I'll wipe off any of the junk that's in there. I'm going to have to wipe it off again because my cleaning brush is going to deposit stuff in there, but I like to get the bulk of it. And I'm just going to get like a mental before and after here. Yeah, it's pretty dirty. I haven't cleaned it in a while. Alright, so what I do at this point, I have just a container here because I don't like dipping my brush into the container with my solvent and contaminate it further. So what I like to do is open my Hoppe's number 9. If you're using Hoppe's number 9, part of the process of like getting it ready to use, you got to smell it. Because like Hoppe number 9 is the best smelling stuff on the planet. I think they made an air freshener. It's like somebody made an air freshener at one point. Super weird. Wouldn't use it, but really good idea, right? Alright, so what I'll do is I'll just kind of pour it onto my brush. You can also like pour it into your container and then dip your brush in the container. But I feel that way you end up throwing away more, I feel like. So a little bit of this goes a long way. If you don't spill any on the table, you're probably not doing it right. Then we just insert it. Don't go back and forth, go all the way through because we want to get as much as that Hoppe's like distributed throughout the barrel as possible. And I don't have a choke tube in, so it's going to go into those threads there. That's perfectly fine. Then we'll work it all the way back, all the way forward. Do that a few times, and now we're going to let it sit. And you can see that that brush is pretty gross. So I'm going to use what I have in here. Just kind of get it on that brush. I'm going to take my choke tube, just kind of push my choke tube through there. I'm going to take these clean parts, get them out the way of my mess here. And I'm just going to push that choke tube through. Alright, and I'm going to set that down, let that soak for a bit. Alright, and as it's soaking in the barrel, yep, alright, so now I'm just going to work it through a few times here. Alright, and areas we're kind of mindful of and concentrating on, right? So the throat right here, That's where a lot of stuff will build up right there, right? So I say the throat, like that forcing cone area, that's something to be mindful of. And as you get towards the end of the barrel, right where that choke tube meets the actual like barrel itself on the inside shoulder, be mindful of that too. That's where a lot of your buildups are going to be. So the forcing cone and your choke tube transition, we'll call it. All right. I'm going to wipe off the length of my rod here. And in normal circumstances, I would switch out, what I'm using for my patches. But I have another rod ready to go for that. So, what I'll do is, I'll just take a handful of these patches here. I'm going to subtract one, actually. Alright, and the first set I run through, I usually do it dry, right? And you could also have, put your hoppies on your patches, rain that through, then rain your brush. But honestly, this is just how I like to do it. So we'll run dry patches through here. And they should be nice and tight, which these are. That's great. Alright, and as you can see, it's a pretty dirty barrel. And when I'm stacking patches like this, you don't need to be wasteful. You can just take that dirty patch, flip it over, right? And then put it on the back side. So now your next patch up is a cleaner patch. And I'll run it through dry one more time. Alright, that's looking a lot better. Same thing, take that top patch, transfer it to the back. And at this point, I'll take my rim oil. Where are you? Right there. And go through with the rim oil. And as I go through with the rim oil, I'll kind of work on that chamber area right there just to get that rim oil onto the chamber, right? Then I'll push through. Alright, and that's looking pretty good. What I'll do now, and a lot of this, you notice there's some junk on there. A lot of that is actually coming from where those threads open up. So what you'll want to do is actually, I'll use some air for that, is to clean out the thread area for your choke tube threads. And move this back here. I'll just stick a patch on my pinky and get it that way. It's a lot easier if you're doing that on a 12 gauge than a 20. See, like that's just from the choke tube threads area because we pushed all that junk into it. Alright, yeah, we're looking a lot better now. Alright, and all I'll do now is on my patch stack here, I'll use or actually what I'll do is just pull off one of the dirties, put a dry patch on, and run it through. And that looks pretty good. I'll roll with that. That's a pretty clean barrel. If we get it any cleaner, we're not going to notice any difference in performance whatsoever. And there's a nice mirror finish in there. Looks great. Okay. So, I notice I have some grass under my rib here. Okay, now we're good. You can look at your barrel lug on the bottom here, just kind of wipe that off. And of course, just to protect the metal, give it a coat of rim oil and wipe off the excess. And that'll keep everything nice and protected whenever we put it back in the safe. Notice I didn't say case. Don't store your gun in a case. Cases are made of some sort of fabric usually, or they have some sort of foam in them, and all that stuff holds moisture, and that moisture, believe it or not, will rust your gun. Let me just clean up my mess a little bit here. Still got to do that choke tube. Alright. So for the choke tube, you can use a shorter rod if you have one. If not, you can just use, of course, the same one you use for your barrel. Alright. So choke tubes usually get pretty gross. That's where you'll see a lot of your plastic buildup from the wad and stuff like that start to go in there. And in most cases, I'll actually, especially on 12 gauges, I'll just use the rag and run the rag through a few times. And you'll be able to visually see. I know I'm not going to be able to represent this on camera, unfortunately. But you can see, the inside of your choke tube should be shiny. And dull areas will be where your plastic and stuff is building up. Let's see if I can get this going the way I want it here. Yeah, there we go. I'll just kind of turn it there. And it's nice and shiny in there. Alright. So I'm going to clean up my solvent here with my rag a bit. I'm going to set this rag aside and switch rags. I'm going to close my hoppies. We're done with that. I'm going to take some rim oil. Hit the outside, hit a little bit of the inside. Wipe it down real good. Alright. And that's all there is to it for the choke tube. Okay, so whenever you put your choke tube back into your barrel, let me get these rods out of the way here. When you put your choke tube back into your barrel, you need to use some kind of grease. You can use a thick oil if you want, that's okay. But some kind of grease is usually recommended. This Spec 76 probably worked just fine, honestly, so I'm gonna put some on here, get it all in the threads, right? Then I'm just going to do the same exact thing on the other side. Like I said, they make specific greases just for choke tubes. If you want to use that, absolutely go for it. Brownells Action Lube Plus would probably work pretty well too. But just anything to keep that choke tube from rusting and seizing in there. And what I usually do is as you can see, I'll work it back and forth a few times here. And I'll actually take it out just to kind of show you. And that oil is nice and dark too, so you can actually see what's going on here. It's all in the threads. It's worked its way all over the body there. All those major contact points are now, there's oil trapped in there. Which is good, that's what we want. and we'll just snug that up nice and tight here. Always make sure your choke tube is tight in there. If it's loose a little bit and you start shooting, guess what? All that junk that's being pushed out behind your shot is getting stuck between your choke tube and your barrel, and that'll seize it up real quick. All right. Okay, so that's our barrel assembly. We don't need to really lubricate anything else here. If you want, like we had some rim oil that we coated our barrel in, but where this actual extension piece is going to go into a receiver, you want to make sure that's not going in dry. So I have a light film of rim oil there, and that's good enough for me. We'll set our barrel aside. Let's put this magazine tube assembly back together. What we're going to do for that, I'm going to take my spring. I'm going to take some, I'm using the Otis dry lube, but any dry film lubricant is preferred on the spring. I usually don't like to use a wet lube. The reason I don't like to use a wet lube is because your magazine tube gets pretty dirty with stuff from the field, just different junk, and you don't want anything else clogging it up, right? So dry film, we'll spray that down. That dries pretty fast. We'll just set it right there. Plastic follower, honestly, I just run that in dry. The inside of this tube is nice and clean. My follower, if it's aluminum, I usually put a little bit of dry lube on it, but honestly, plastic follower is somewhat self-lubricating, so we'll just put it in just like that. The spring itself will go in either way. It's bi-directional, right? So you don't have to put it in a certain way. The plug goes on the end of the spring, right? Don't put the plug on the follower side. It always goes on the opposite end. This is the tricky part here. You just gotta kind of squirrel this in. So this is easier whenever I'm not doing it on camera, I promise. There we go. All right. And now, again, we talked about spring tension previously. This is a very prime example of such. All right, now we have our retaining clip here that we had on the end of that tool. Now, I will say this while I capture it here. Let me get this under my arm so you can see. All right, if I let go of this thing, don't duck. You got a screen between me and you. It's okay. So this will kind of just that follower will sit in there like so. And this will push into that barrel like so, as you can see here. And I'm going to push it in so that it's just below flush, right? Just like that. Easy enough. And if yours is the wing type, you just push it in, turn it, and you're good to go. But this is the spring type, which is a little more complicated, but we got it. And that's all there is to that. All right, now let's get the rest of the stuff back in the gun. So this is our action bar assembly here. As you can see, there are some high wear points here, like, especially this angle right here. This is what actually tells your shell interrupter latches to activate and when to not activate, when to let a shell in, when not to let a shell in. So this is pretty important to keep to kind of keep eye on here. So we'll just put a little bit of lube there. Right along those, and it'll tell you where it wants lubricant. All those high wear surfaces, that's where your gun wants lubricant. Your gun's talking to you. All you gotta do, just listen to it. Give it what it wants, and it'll keep working for you. Alright. Now we'll take this block, okay, and this is gonna sit on here just like that. Now it has a tail, right? This is the tail. The tail's notched. It's a good way to remember it. That goes in the rear. And again, if you look closely at this, it'll talk to you. the bolts assembly will just drop right on top of that. And you should be able to slide it back and forth. The locking block will go down. It'll pop back up, right? So what I'll do at this point, I usually have it in the up position, and I'll just put a little bit of oil there. I'll put oil where it contacts the barrel. Put it in the down position, and just a drop on each side. And then work it back and forth a few times here. And there's the excess right there. I'll just run my finger across. And also, on your extractor plunger, right, you can put a little drop of oil facing downward on the plunger where it meets the bolt, and work that back and forth a few times. I just undid it there. Alright. Work it back and forth a few times. Wipe off the excess. Alright, now we need to get this back into the gun. So, I'm going to slide it onto the tube. Alright, and once you get here, you'll hit a wall. Alright, so what I do here is I'll turn it vertical. This is the area you need to kind of pay attention to. Remember those interrupter latches we had to push to get it out? Well, guess what? Now we got to push to get it in. So on the ejection port side, we're going to push that side in first with our index finger. You'll feel it kind of spring there. If it won't go in, pull this assembly out just a little bit, and then it'll go in. So push it in, and you'll feel the action bar go past it. Now we got to jump to the other side and push it. I'll try and do it so you can see here. Alright, it won't go in, so let's just come out just a hair, but not so far that we go past this side. Push it in, and then once you feel it go in, everything will drop into place. So you got to push in ejection side, go in a little bit, push in opposite side, and then you can go in the rest of the way, right? So that's how you get these back in. And we have lubricant on those, so we'll just gently work them back and forth a few times. All right. Now, we can put that trigger assembly back in. So, with the action in the as forward as it'll go, take my trigger group, and I'll actually lubricate it first here. So on this like carrier dog right here, what I'll do is put a drop of oil on the plunger, work it back and forth, then a little bit of oil on the top, a little bit of oil on the hammer because the bolt rides past it and pushes against it. I'll just rub that around with my finger. Then another little drop there. Okay. That's really the only place we need to, well, actually, I'll put it on fire, guide that hammer forward, and on the back side of the hammer, lubricate, and then cock it back down. And just kind of push it, spread that oil around. I like using this Sons of Liberty oil, especially for video, because it's not clear and you can see exactly where I'm putting it. Alright, I'll put it back on safe here just so that my hammer doesn't fall while I'm doing this. Okay, so now coming in at a forward angle, I want to get this carrier piece here on the side in first, just like so. And just kind of guide everything in. So when you're going in, this through hole that this pin goes through, it can kind of move a little bit left and right, so you just got to make sure you're not getting hung up on that. So just kind of go in with everything. And the reason I told you to put it on safe is because I like to put my finger in the hole here to act as leverage, and you don't want your hammer going forward and then getting in the way. So Alright, so we go in, just kind of wiggle everything kind of back and forth a little bit here, and it'll go into place. So the front's still sitting a little proud. I'll just kind of push that in. Alright. So it should fit flush. As you can see here, everything's nice and flush. But it's a little further forward. So if it's sitting too far forward, just take it and pull it back. There you go. Alright. Now pins. I'll just do the big pin first. You don't have to. There you go, just like that. And our bench block or your block of wood or whatever you're using, you can just use that to tap your pins in. I'm doing this as if you're not using a hammer, so minimal tools, you know. Alright, there. You'll feel those pins click back into place. Alright, so from here, we'll just drop our action back. We'll take our barrel and slide our barrel on here, and especially in this case, with this forend, if you're using the original wood forend, you'll have to come forward a little bit, and there you go. It'll slide right on. Now, this is very important. Whenever you put this cap on, thread it on, okay? Make sure you put this on nice and snug, and every time you take your gun out, make sure this is nice and snug. So if this is even just a little bit loose, the barrel will wiggle back and forth a little bit. And as you can see, let me get this. Let me get my pointing tool here. As you can see, this piece that's riveted into the receiver, that's your ejector, okay? That's what actually tells your shell to eject out of the gun whenever you pull the action back. Now, this is the 20 gauge. There's no spring. If you have the 12 gauge, there's a little piece of spring still there. So, as you can see, the front of it goes into the barrel. If your barrel's a little bit loose, whenever you're shooting the gun, the pressure can torque your barrel a little bit and break that ejector ear off, okay? And like I said, it's riveted into the gun. Remington ejectors are, you know, at this point in time, I don't know when you're watching this video, they're not easy to get a hold of. And not only that, but they're not easy to replace. It's not something I'd recommend doing yourself, and your gunsmith is going to charge you a little bit of money to do it because it's a little time consuming. Okay, so keep that in mind. Just make sure, I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just, you know, just make sure you keep this nice and snug. You'll never have an issue. All right. And that's all there is to it. That's basic. I know this is kind of a longer video, but that's basic maintenance on the 870. Once you get down to it, you'll be able to clean it in, you know, a quarter of the time it took to make this video. So function check. We're on safe, right? Action's locked forward. We're going to pull the trigger. Nothing happens. Okay. And we are, of course, unloaded here. Right. Then we're going to put it on fire. We're going to pull the trigger. Now, when we pull the trigger, that should also unlock our action. So, action's unlocked. Now, if you slowly let off the trigger, you should feel it reset. You'll hear a click. Okay, that's good. Now, come back to safe. Nothing should happen. Fire. We're good. Alright, and so, things about the 870, you know, whenever your action's locked, firing the trigger will always unlock the action. Okay. There is a lever on the side here that will manually unlock your action at any point in time. Just hold that lever down. And as you can see, when you pull the trigger, that lever goes in manually because the hammer forces it. Okay. So, that's all there is to it. That's basic maintenance on the Remington 870 shotgun. So if you have any questions or comments, tips, favorite oils, you know, whatever you like to use, feel free to post those in the comments down below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching this on the website, you need help, assistance, comments, anything, feel free to give us a call on the tech line. We'll be happy to help you out. And if you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button. A lot of people commenting on these videos aren't subscribers. I want to change that. Alright, so make sure you do that. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.